Have you ever been so late to something that by the time you got there, you'd missed out on the best part? Yeah, that was me in roughly 2014, at the ripe age of 26 when I first discovered MMOs and, well, gaming. I'm not saying I hadn't gamed before then, but the amount of games I'd actually played were sparse at best. Today, I'm going to take you all on a little journey as we explore how it felt coming into MMOs in my late 20s. What specifically brought me to the genre, and how it felt diving into the world as an adult that was untouched by the world of MMOs. To give you a quick rundown of my history with video games, when I was around 10 years old, my family bought our first computer. I remember exploring the likes of Solitaire, Space Cadet Pinball, Oregon Trail, Commander Keen, and finding these were all very diverting things to partake in, but I'd always opted to go outside before choosing to game. Not always by choice, of course, as my parents restricted the time I was allotted to maybe 1 hour supervised every week. Flash forward to years later, my brother built me a PC to play Unreal Tournament 2004 with him. This was my first handshake with first-person shooters. From there, we exploded into Crisis, MechWarrior, and Unreal Tournament 3 as the years went on. It never dawned on me to really use my computer for anything other than like AIM or gaming with my brother on the weekends and maybe the occasional Sims. Because, you know, studies came first, and I never saw games, especially FPS games, as anything more than something you could randomly sign into and just go shoot at things briefly for. It wasn't magical, it wasn't pulling me into a world I could get lost in. Mechanically speaking, you simply dodge, aim, and shoot for most of them. Or at least that was the general gist of games back then. The aiming part was hard, and other than that, it's just about going in and destroying things. Yeah, you got a story, but it wasn't overly detailed or complex. The characters were just kinda there. Now, those games were fine, and I had my fun in them, but it wasn't until after I graduated from nursing school in 2012 that I found myself moving into a tiny city with a huge trauma hospital where I knew no one, that I finally saved up enough to get myself a laptop to watch movies on. This laptop brought me into a new world. After it led me to my obviously now ex, it went on to lead me to the one good thing that they brought into my life: MMOs. In 2014, I created an account on Star Wars: The Old Republic, and as I hit play, the sound of the lightsaber powering on gave my heart a flutter. I loved Star Wars. I watched each movie with my dad while eating pizza with our little TV trays while he goofily smiled and pointed things out to me. My heart has since then belonged to Han Solo. So for me, to be in this world, it was like the moon to the waves. The effects made my heart swell with something I hadn't felt in a while. Nostalgia. Just the tiniest occurrence, like the ability to choose my race, though admittedly some of the races were definitely locked, from the world to which I so highly loved, was just amazing to me. I had the ability to edit the physical appearance of my characters just like The Sims and change their voices. I could make my fantasy Star Wars me. And there I was in all my imaginative glory, a Jedi. I gobbled the quest up faster than probably intended for an MMO. I created my own lightsaber, fought some Empire scum, and more importantly, explored. It pulled me in so fast, I think I lost my footing for a few days before coming up for air. The other players ran past me, and I discovered that I could wave at them. I could talk to them. And they were so helpful. It wasn't me versus them, it was me and them versus the world. Guilds were a thing too, a community of people who loved the game just like me and offered help whenever I needed it. I remember someone gave me a lightsaber that had a soft glow near the base and was in my favorite color, and I just sat there thinking this was the coolest moment ever. It was so impactful that it still sticks with me to this day, and I still remember that person's in-game name. Relationships weren't limited to the actual humans playing the game though. Realizing you could create bonds, romance, or piss off characters that were roped into your story made it all just feel like I was reading a book or watching a fantastic, interactive movie that I could control. I actually cared about the NPCs in this world. Though what blew my mind even further, what they don't tell you about starting MMOs, is the difficulty that these types of games present. Before, where my choice of weaponry was limited to a small selection of guns that would either shoot bullets or rockets, I was now faced with so many skills I didn't think I had enough keys on my keyboard. Learning the ins and outs of these skills was necessary for me. I wanted to be the best Jedi I could be. I studied them, I arranged them in terms of damage dealt and put stuns and other grips and holds to another side so I'd remember what they were there for. At this juncture, I didn't realize I could change keybinds either. You'd think I already know that, but I didn't. The information overload that occurred to me when entering this MMO was beyond measure. The tutorials and guide points were important to me, and there were mechanics that needed to be followed. There was so much to do: dungeons, operations, aka raids, PvP, farming, crafting, and so much more, and I did them all. One late night, as I was sitting there discovering the other stories other classes had, I glanced up at the clock and realized it was 2 in the morning and I had to wake up for work in less than 3 hours. Where had the time gone? So as I groggily labored my way through my 12-hour shift, I ached to be at home playing in this deep and wonderful world I'd found. But if there was this world, were there others? I felt inspired to seek out more worlds. I wanted to adventure as far as I could and see where it'd take me. And I'd been in Star Wars: The Old Republic for nearly 2 years at that point. As I filtered through a few MMOs, the likes of Rift, Riders of Icarus, and Terra crossed my plate, but something was missing with these. It's then I realized the games were kind of empty. The occasional person crossed my path, but I mainly did things by myself. It felt really lonely. I love these worlds and I couldn't understand why there weren't that many people around to play with. I was left with this feeling as though the stories being told just lacked the depth and substance that I was now used to. Terra was probably the most filled of the three, and I did play it at the time to max level. I attribute it to introducing me to action combat, which is a whole other thing entirely, and the newfound joys of what I'd like to call the healer life. As I dodged around the monsters in the dungeons and raised people, I realized not only did I enjoy helping people in real life, I also enjoyed healing in games. Instead of watching my damage, I had to watch everyone else, and I could no longer really fail mechanics because if I died, they died. I realized that I had a purpose. I was important. It also introduced me to prepping for a more difficult dungeon so I could keep everyone alive. This took so much more time and effort than any FPS game had taken me to prepare for. Before, it was boom, hit a button, and I was there in the scene shooting things, but now I needed to actually study to prepare. From there, it started to go downhill. I moved on to Revelation Online, and even though it was a new game at the time, it died faster than I could have ever dreamed. I also felt lost in the world, and not in the fun kind of way. Citadel came and went for me too. Flashy new MMOs were releasing left and right, but none of them had that special thing, that spark that made me want to play until the wee hours of the morning. I spent some time searching for the next MMO hit, and little did I know I hadn't even scraped the surface of what was out there. I managed to stumble upon Blade and Soul, where I fell in love at first sight, but it was a little too late. Yes, the story was decent, the combat was fast, but the game, once again, was an empty husk. Some of the dungeons I couldn't do because there was no one there, and when I asked where everyone was, they said at max level. But if they were all max level, who was going to play with me? At this time, both Styx and I were just good friends. We were looking for an MMO we shared mutual interest in and settled on Blade and Soul. The two of us proceeded to play the game, and we managed to still have fun, which made it special to me. Sadly, I ended up leaving after completing most of the content. I was doing what every MMOer does now. I was chasing the hype. I just didn't know what MMO to actually play. Which one had the most hype? Which one would be the best? I knew WoW existed, but I'd heard it was for nerdy losers that hid in their basements so much that I think I'd actually come to believe it. So I never bothered to touch it. It wasn't until my boyfriend, now husband, forced me into it that my world again exploded in 2018 before Battle for Azeroth. As I sat there staring at the great many choices of characters, I felt that sense of excitement again, but begrudgingly so. I didn't want to play this ugly game. It looked like something out of my grandmother's basement despite being told they had overhauled the character models. This was a joke. I was not going to like this. The first dungeon hit where this little creature was throwing food out of a pot and I was eating it for buffs that I realized this is really dumb. Why was I doing this? Star Wars had me at first lightsaber sound and now I'm fighting a thing in a pot. What has my life become? Is this the most beloved MMO in the world? You have got to be kidding me. It wasn't until probably Pandaria that the game actually began to grow on me. It was fun. The story was interesting. I still didn't understand though why most of the amazing cutscenes had to take place outside of the game on YouTube. This was a different experience. All the while, I listened to my husband regaling me with stories of old, how he was so much better at this expansion and so on and so forth. Slowly but surely, the areas began to look better. The plot thickened. My purpose in the game became a little bit more clear to me. As I entered into Battle for Azeroth after the expansion launched, after months of getting to max level to be there for it, I was thrilled to be there. The world, the people, and the ins and outs were interesting to me. I had no clue where I was going in most of the cities or even how to get where I needed to be without the help of my husband. I was exploring again though in this new type of open world, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited to be there. I was flying, sailing, and riding anywhere I wanted to be, albeit I didn't know where. It was also introducing me to world v world fights. Masses of people would suddenly appear on my now upgraded computer and it would stride to capture what was actually occurring on its screen as we fought back the horde. I remember yelling orders at my husband directing our group where next to strike so we could get our dailies done. It wasn't until we completed everything that I sat back in my chair, exhausted and yet satisfied, did I realize this was exactly what I was searching for. That thrill, that depth, the discovery in battles, the complexities of learning new skills, besting someone in a fight and getting that sense of achievement when you run in to aid a fight and the tide suddenly turned in your faction's favor. But there I was again, at the peak of what I could do for the time in the game and now left with a tiny hole in my heart, so we went and played the Horde. I'm glad I joined WoW when I did, but I hear people tell me stories of the fond memories from expansions past and their disappointment in the Battle for Azeroth expansion. I came a little too late to have experienced that, but I didn't care, and I don't care. The world was alive and full of things for me to do. And while I honed my skills as a healer, I learned new tips and tricks like actually doing more damage on top of healing. I learned how to use new keybinds because how I have my hands on the keyboard isn't traditional for gaming, I guess. I got myself a gaming mouse. I evolved as a gamer. I became better, not great, but better. I did raids and progressed in PvP. The next step I was guided towards was Final Fantasy XIV in 2019, another game my husband loves. It looked cute and I could be a cat girl, so I was down. No one, I mean no one, prepared me for what was about to happen. Upon entering, I was slowly moving forward and I was frustrated with how few skills I had, and it was so patiently making me learn each and every one of them without throwing too many in my face all at once. Quite frankly, and I know this might upset a few people, I was bored. Leveling felt like torture to me, and we stepped away briefly. At the behest of my friends, we returned though. They'd played this game for years now, and I was new. They helped push me through and made it fun, and as I leveled, and the community was just so nice. And then something struck me. The story. Never in my life have I played a game where I was so moved to tears. Laughter, sure, but tears, no. As I watched a tiny potato lie limply, hot tears rolling down my cheeks until I finally burst into a full-blown cry on my husband's shoulder. This would happen again and again. It was like therapy for me. I mean, I already cried a lot after a hard day's work at the hospital, but this was a different type of cry. I was crying for the death of a fictional character, not a real person, but it felt just as real emotionally to me. It was then I realized that games could tell a story, wrap you into the story, capture you so deeply that you could literally feel exactly what your character should be feeling in that moment. From there, I did as everyone had instructed. I took my time, I explored, I made friends, and lost track of time. That's when Shadowbringers dropped. The symphony of feelings this expansion made me feel was unlike any I'd ever felt before from a game. It gave me courage and hope, and once we reached the end, I mustered up the courage to do something I'd never thought I'd do as a gamer. I attempted Savage Raids. I usually steered clear from more difficult content in MMOs because I felt this small feeling like I was bad at the whole MMOing thing, and I still do. These fights required such coordination, preparation, and dedication that I didn't think I could do it. I also thought I could do it alone until halfway through the second Savage fight I was introduced to statics, aka raid groups. Time flew on. I accomplished one after another with different kind souls who took me under their wing. I went from gray parses to green and now blue, which is just slightly above average. I find solace in the fact that I'm average for less than half of the gaming population in Final Fantasy XIV that attempts Savage Raids. A personal accomplishment I will never forget. Since then, and along the way, I've come into more and more MMOs. Mainly what we'd refer to as dead ones, forgotten ones, old ones, obscure ones, new ones that are empty faster than a room that got farted in. Why didn't these ones thrive where other ones had? Maybe I was too late to them to enjoy them in their prime. Not a single one of them sparked that same flame I got from Star Wars: The Old Republic, WoW, or Final Fantasy XIV. I'm still seeking that same feeling from another MMO, and my heart is open and willing for it, as I'm sure many of you are as well. We're all ready for that game that makes your heart flutter again, makes you wonder what's next, makes you stay up until the early morning despite work or school the next day. I go back sometimes to Star Wars: The Old Republic, and it feels emptier than it had before. I think it's doing fine, but I still worry about it because I did love it. I walk around older MMOs and I don't see another soul the entire time I'm playing. I can't do dungeons, I can't do raids, and I can't PvP. I can't fall in love with an empty vessel. It seems of late we have a lot of MMOs coming out, and while some of them are fun, I can tell you now that they lack the depth that the older, more successful ones have, even if I played them for years after their release. Even the games I loved are squishing themselves down now to be less hefty in areas, to be faster, to cater to the new blood coming in. And in doing so, you lose something about them, I think. New games are fast, it's fluffy, and it's just not as good. I have high expectations now after my journey, and it's okay to play games to just have fun. But I look forward to that next hefty MMO that drops that has something amazing. I kind of wish I hadn't been late to the party, but I'm here now, and I'm so thankful for the journey I had, and I love hearing your stories of older MMOs we've now lost or are empty that you once loved. For now, while I wait, I'm starting a new journey that's slowly winning me over. Console games. Maybe if you guys want to hear that story, I can tell you my late to console game story too, as I'm attempting it for the first time as of 2019. Anyway, thank you all for listening to my late to the party story. This was Mrs. Sticks signing off for now. Bye!
This ain't where I belong. Hey, look at me, man, what I've become. I've been running east, looking for a sunset, digging deep since '99. I think it's time for me to go, burn all bridges. All I know, I got lost along the way.